that's going to bring a more mature and wiser person to the surface so that that extrovert has some actual depth to him. And that's the key area. We can be that extroverted person that goes out into the world, but we don't want to be a shallow extrovert. We want to be an extroverted person that can communicate to the world with that inner solitude, that introvert that has gained some insight through gentlemen, what's going on? Another great day to be alive. A great opportunity to choose to dive into something deeper than those shallow puddles of mud that we've been wallowing in for too long. This is the Better Man Channel, where we choose to dive into the depths of wisdom, of knowledge, of understanding. We realize that healthy doses of solitude provide us with these pools of depth that we can drop our buckets into and lift out these golden laden nuggets of knowledge, wisdom, truth, identity, where we begin to explore who we truly are. And again, it's in those healthy doses of solitude and states of isolation where we find that. I read a couple days ago where Carl Jung, in his autobiography, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, wrote that early on, he realized that he kind of had this dual personality. Not like in a dissociated, split personality crazy guy, but that he had two sides of him. And the way I like to think of it is that we have different hats for different roles in our life, man. I'm a dad, so I have that dad hat. At work, we have that work hat. I'm a son, so I have a son hat. We have these different hats that we wear so that in accordance to where we're at and how we need to function, there may be a little different personality that comes to the surface more than in other areas. And I don't mean that we're some superficial asshole. I just mean that different roles require different characteristics to rise to the top. And so he's saying that I had these different personalities. One was kind of this extroverted, love of life, energetic, vital, witty, charming, let's go out with crowds. And then there was this other personality side to me that was more mature, a little older, a little wiser, a little more composed. And he said that it was that second personality that fascinated him, but it took isolation. He found it a lot of times in nature walks and just being by himself where wisdom began to speak to him. Wisdom became a little more clear, and it was almost a state of restoration outside of the hustle and bustle of the external, where you had to kind of compete and compare with everybody else. And it was kind of a give and take process, right? When we're communicating with friends and we're in our circle, it's not just all about us. We have to be careful to that balance of give and take. And it had me thinking, man, about who I am and those inner personalities that I have. Am I extroverted? Am I introverted? Which one's better? Which one needs more work? And I started thinking that I lean more towards the introverted level, man. I like solitude. I like to read and think and kind of ponder and ruminate over what I've learned and kind of piece that together in a picture that has meaning for me. But I'm also like to at times be that extroverted person. There's a part of me that kind of likes and craves for that life of the party. Let's go do something. Let's live. But when you think about it, that's draining, right? It's cool sometimes. You dress up, you go out, you hang with friends, you have communication. But at the end of the night, you're ready to go back home and retreat back to what's yours, your kingdom, your own thoughts, where it's not always give and take. And the idea of that being draining and tiring is that it provides kind of this nothing of depth, right? That external extrovert, hanging out with the friends and enjoying life in accordance with everybody's kind of standards is very shallow. And I don't mean that in a negative light, man. I mean shallow that it just doesn't have any depth to it. We're out here having fun. We're dressed up. We're nice. We're communicating. We're all getting along. But there's no depth to it. And I see this in the world today. We're all wanting to be connected. We're all wanting to look like the next person and speak the right thing and not push anyone back. So it's this very shallow, surface level coexisting level that we came to, and there's no depth to it. And we see this in a lot of people. You get in some comment sections on YouTube and you realize that a lot of people don't have any depth to them, man. It's just kind of this shallow facade, this shallow existence. And again, I'm not saying anything's wrong with going out and being that extroverted person. If you're extroverted and the life of the party, that's good. That's healthy. We all need certain levels and certain degrees of going out there and connecting with reality, because it shows us reality for what it is. We can retreat within all damn day long, but that doesn't mean the rest of the world is making that the reality. So we have to have healthy doses of both of those. But again, in order to recharge, we have to have those levels of solitude where we go inward, where we find those golden nuggets of wisdom, of knowledge, of understanding. We get to know ourselves, and that requires a retreat inward. And I think a lot of people, man, they go through these crises of who am I of this? I'm tired of having to compete. I'm tired of having to think like everybody else. I'm drained. And that's what that extroverted external dependence is always going to come down to. You're going to feel drained because it's a shallow level of living where you're always trying to compete, always trying to be the life of the party. And that's taxing on a person, man, because we all need to recharge. And that's the key personality of that introvert that I think we all need to at times lean to. Many people need to run towards that. We think we're on top of the world because we're this extrovert, when we really need to retreat internally and begin to find that introvert within us that's a little more mature, a little more wise, a little more knowledgeable, that has those golden nuggets of truth that fit you. And the premise behind this channel is for us to be influencers, not so much directly on society, but influencers over our own life. And you can never influence yourself if you're constantly stuck in that shallowness of that extrovert that's feeding off everybody else instead of being nourished by self. And those healthy doses of solitude provide that. We get a chance to know who we are, what we are really about. And there's some depth in that. And I know it comes off as arrogant or prideful, since I say that I lean more towards an introvert. When I say it comes across that I'm saying introverts are better, but I'm not. I'm saying there's that middle ground. I lean more introverted, so I'm always going to be most likely 60-70% introverted. But I very much need that 30% extrovert where I connect with outside world, where I don't become that isolated hermit that goes insane. And for an extroverted person, they may lean 70% extroverted, where they can run a little harder. They have a little more energy to deal with the external world, to deal with the communication, to deal with that level of being the life of the party. But they definitely need that 30% healthy dose of isolation to refuel, recharge, find out who I really am. And so there's no right or wrong on this introvert extrovert. There's this healthy dynamic where those polarities can intersect, but it's going to be different for each person. And so I think a lot of times, definitely in the past, that introvert quality personality has been, there's a stigma to it. Oh, you hermit, isolated, shy, not taking advantage of the world, just living in your corner kind of person. Some of the wisest, genius, most innovative people have been in that isolation, because that's where genius comes from. That's where getting to know yourself comes from. That's where great ideas come from. When you've separated from the rest of the world and their way of thinking, you can find your way of thinking. But you can think about it. Some of the greatest genius, innovative minds have been these hermits that are a little confused or a little out of place when it comes to the rest of the world. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I just want to find my middle ground where I have one foot in the real world, where I can communicate, where I can be witty, where I can be charming, where I can be the life of the party. And I want to have one foot in that solitude, that isolated state, where I know myself. I've spent time with myself. I'm comfortable with myself. There's some depth in that. I gain wisdom and insight and knowledge. I know my values. I know my beliefs. And if we're too caught up in that extroverted external being the life of the party, it usually tends to lean in the direction of validation. And again, I don't want to paint anything in a negative light. We all like to be validated, and being validated, I think, is crucial in a healthy personality. We need validation sometimes, but constantly needing that and seeking that in a 24/7 extroverted external way is not healthy, because you're going to crash. You're going to become drained. We can recognize that easily in the holiday season, right? Those introverts are going to easily be drained. We're spending time with all these people. It's a give and take process. I can't just say what's on my mind and be fully me. And again, I don't mean that in a facade of being fake. I just mean there's habits and routines to be able to function in life, and we have to follow those so that we have a foundational level where people can function. And so sometimes it's this give and take where a lot of times you're giving more than you're actually taking. And that's when we find, especially as introverts, it's good to retreat back into yourself. We want to go home. We want to be comfortable where we are. And that can be same for the extroverts. If they're 70% extrovert, they don't need to be 70% isolated, or they're going to go crazy and antsy and ready to go. We have to find that middle ground. Healthy doses of solitude bring out those golden nuggets of wisdom and truth. But if we're only holding on to them for ourselves and never go out into the real world and let it be known, then we're going to drive ourselves crazy. We're going to be bitter and resentful because we think that we have everything figured out and know all things, because, my God, I've spent 40 hours this week in deep thought. And that's great, and maybe you do, but we have to be practical too, this pragmatic thinking. I may have the greatest idea in the world, but if I can't implement that into reality and use a little bit of extrovert qualities and personality to go out and practice those, then what good does it matter? Isolation and solitude in healthy doses is great. It brings about this more mature, wise personality within us. We get to find out that true nature without being caught up in the superficial race of the world. But we also need to challenge ourselves to connect with the world, to practice that little extrovert that goes out and can connect with the real world, because we do live in a real world. And in order to fully embrace life, we have to be able to connect with those around us. And so it's crucial that we find that middle ground. And again, it's not always going to be a 50-50. Maybe it's 70% introvert, 30% extrovert. Maybe it's 70% extrovert, 30% introvert. But we have to realize, in order to be fully capable of reaching our full potential, like the great psychoanalyst Carl Jung said, we have these dual personalities. Neither one of them are right or wrong, but it's that solitude that's going to bring a more mature and wiser person to the surface, so that extrovert has some actual depth to him. And that's the key area. We can be that extroverted person that goes out into the world, but we don't want to be a shallow extrovert. We want to be an extroverted person that can communicate to the world with that inner solitude, that introvert that has gained some insight through self-reflection. I love you guys. You'll hear from me next episode.